I'm Mike Esneault, and welcome to the Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge's AC23 Plus Artist Legacy Series podcast. This is a series where we talk to artists who are doing amazing things in the areas of the arts, including performance, education, production, as well as arts advocacy. We record this series in the Virginia and John Nolan Black Box Studio, as well as in the Jan and Bill Grimes recording studio here at the Rouge Community Arts Center. Be sure to visit artsbr.org for more information on all the great things we are doing here at the Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge. Hope you enjoyed the podcast series, and thanks for tuning in.
Well, welcome all our viewers and listeners to AC23 Plus podcast series put on here at the Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge. And today I have a amazing guest. It's a real treat for me, Mr. Byron Stripling.
Hi.
Hey.
What's going on?
What's up?
I'm up here in, well, are we in Baton Rouge?
We are officially in Baton Rouge, yes.
All right. So I'm glad to be here because I have not eaten like this before. I came here and I had started my diet and I said, I'm not going to eat any bread. And then I saw some of the sandwiches y'all make.
This is not the place to do a diet at all.
Okay, but you have to tell me that before. Because then I can lose weight before I come here so I can gain it.
Who are your advisors, man? I mean, who you been talking to?
The Grimes family.
Oh, well, that's your problem.
And they have led me astray so many times.
Yeah, well, you can count on that. There's certain things you can count on. Taxes, and the Grimes is leaving you astray. Well, Byron, thank you for being here, man. You are here because, well, we already said it, the Grimeses. Mm-hmm. So you're a dear friend of how many years now?
Oh, I don't talk age.
Okay.
The only person old that I know of currently that's as old as Bill Grimes is, this man is so old he can't even count. I mean, I don't have, it's, he's into numbers that don't exist.
Wow.
This man is old.
Yeah.
But I love him like a brother.
Right.
And I can't, if you don't mind me talking about him for a little bit, because I like to talk about him.
As long as you talk bad about him, we're good.
Yes, that's it. No, he is a dear friend, and sometimes it turns out when you go to school, because we went to school together, those people end up being your lifelong friends. And when you see them, there's like no time has passed. Like I don't get to see Bill often. We do email and phone sometimes, but it's always a special treat to be around him and his beautiful family. And it's like no time has gone by. It's like the friendship that was in school almost 35 some years ago is still there. It doesn't waver. And that's a joyous thing when you have friends like that. So I love the Grimes and I love their family, and I thank them for hosting me for almost a week here. So
awesome. Yeah. Well, and yes, tonight you're playing a concert. Well, I guess the main impetus behind this was his 70th birthday.
Yes.
So we're going to be celebrating.
It's not the 70th. He's older than that.
Yeah, we're just using that number.
We're just using that as I want Bill to be clear with
good.
Bill. That's just a number that we chose to be polite.
Yeah, to make him look good because he needs all the help.
The man is old.
Yeah. I didn't realize this was going to be a Bill Grimes roast, but I'm enjoying it. Well, I want to talk about you.
This is my favorite subject.
Enough about
I'm
me.
awake
What do you
now.
think
I was
about
asleep before.
We're never going to get through this thing. Okay, well, you're just one of those guys that, even though I have followed your career, I would have followed it whether I didn't even know it or not, because you've worked with so many people. And we'll get to the resume in a little bit. But tell me about how you came up, because people I've had on this podcast, I've always been interested to see how, especially the musicians, how they got into music, in this case, let's say jazz, and what were the circumstances that led you to where you are now?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. It's an easy question because it brings me directly to my family, who were so important to me. My father, Luther Stripling, was an amazing classical singer. He was born in Tignall, Georgia, and they walked from there to Decatur, Georgia. And there my father heard the sounds on his radio because he was alone. His father, was not around, so he was raised by his mother and his sister. And there he heard the Metropolitan Opera broadcast on the radio on Sundays. And he's like, I want to sing like that. Now, that's an unusual thing, honestly, for a black man in America to say, like, well, I want to be like one of those guys. Well, fast forward and not to talk too long. He did it. He sang with orchestras. He conducted orchestras around the country, specifically soloed as a soloist with the Minnesota Orchestra, St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, I think Atlanta Symphony he did, and many others, which I was so little I didn't even know that was happening. My father listened to classical music all day in the morning, and then when he got home from work, because he was a college professor and he got his doctorate, first one in his family to do that. Wow. You're thinking about a family born in poverty, and so he was able to, his mother didn't even read. Like, she would write me the most beautiful cards, but I always wondered why were the words all misspelled. And my mother said, well, first of all, she loves you. Your grandmother loves you. But she didn't go to school. So those misspelled words, and I was just a kid that I didn't know. Right. Those misspelled words, because she never had that kind of education. However, her daughter, my aunt, and my father, they did it. They got all their degrees. My Aunt Mary Lee did not get her doctorate, but she had her master's. This is an amazing thing for a family that came from nothing. But they took nothing and they turned it into something, and that something was a lot. Right. And so with that, then Dad's listening to all this classical music, but he liked to relax when he came home. So he would put on specifically Miles Davis, Four and More, My Funny Valentine record. He just loved all that period of Miles Davis, but crazy about Duke Ellington, crazy about, he loved Clark Terry because of the humor in there, right. On and on and on and on. So I'm hearing all these sounds throughout my house, and it's feeling good. And then I choose the trumpet to be my instrument, specifically because my parents took me to concerts. Am I talking too much?
No, this is perfect.
My parents took me to concerts, and so by the time I was in like junior high school, which back then was like 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, so it's even before what we called then high school, even I had seen Ella Fitzgerald live twice, Duke Ellington 3 times, Count Basie's band probably 4 times, and this is just, when I'm junior high starting to get into high school, and that's the kind of live music that my parents, who were both teachers, didn't have a lot of money, but they always put money aside for music because they thought live music was important. There was something about it that lifted their souls and their spirits. And honestly, young black people need to see young black people doing good things.
Sure.
And my parents made sure that I saw that. They were very religious. They wanted us upright and don't do this, boy, tuck in your shirt. Don't do that, comb your hair, take that hat off when you go inside, polish your shoes. It's the whole thing. Right. After we finished the Miles Davis and all that other stuff and the Duke Ellington my dad would play, now it's getting a little bit, he might have a little glass of wine, and now it's the Temptations and the Four Tops.
Oh, okay, some Motown.
And so he goes to Motown and all that good stuff, any good quality music.
Right.
So that's my early upbringing. Those are the things that brought me to music, and for me, there was no question about what I was going to do. People always say, well, did you think you should be a so-and-so and so-and-so? No, music was always it.
Right. Now, I'm curious, like you mentioned the jazz things, with Ellington and Ella and the Motown, but you also said that you grew up in a very religious family. So I'm curious how much the church music, being involved in that orbit impacted you as as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we went to church 8 days a week. Yeah. And no, we were always there. And again, for me, those were all positive role models, the people within that. And I think that a church is a great place for people to get nurtured and loved, even if you don't have immediate parents or one or two parents are missing. There's somebody in a church that will always give you that hug. And do you find baby and kiss you? And my big thing is my dad would have me play trumpet solos, or I even had to sing solos. And since my dad was a classical singer, if there was a tenor part, there was a vocal part or a baritone part, I would sing the solo, and he would coach me on that. And he would always be mad at me when he did that. But then I would sing in church, and then you go downstairs. They always had cake and coffee after church, and go down there, and the old ladies are kissing on me. And I said, "Mom, I don't like it. I don't want." She's like, "Just love them. They're encouraging you. They love you. Everybody needs that kind of family. It doesn't have to be a church, but you need a family or a group of people, even beyond your family, that say you're okay.
Right.
You're right." So that's what in the Black community, I think, especially that. For the way that we do it, that's what happens there. And so again, there's a place to see those positive role models. As far as the music, it was so important to me. Again, my dad would always do 2 or 3 classical things in our church, even though it was a Baptist church. It's the way he was brought up, and then 2 spirituals, and then 2 gospel songs. And so that's why I loved it all. And all of the gospel and spiritual stuff really moved me. A lot of times we did Latin when we did the classical music because my dad knew how to do it and he could teach it to the choir. But I really related to the spirituals and the gospel. And what I learned from that is the power of music to change people, even the act of singing. You know, the great William James of Harvard said, "I sing not because I'm happy, but I'm happy because I sing." And what I know is that just giving voice to something and sharing a song with somebody has that power to lift them up, turn them around, and plant their feet on solid ground, as the old song used to say. And so learning that and being around that and the gospels and the spiritual, I also realized that rather than, because Black people have gone through a lot in this world, and I realized that everybody's like, "Oh, those Black people, they sure can dance and sing." Well, you'd be dancing and singing too if all the stuff could happen to you, But the singing and the dancing was a release and a relief.
Right.
To come from, if you think about the early spirituals, from that place of being on a ship and having lost your child died on that, or your mother died.
Right.
On that ship on the way over, or was thrown overboard, then you're going to say, "Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long ways from home, a long ways from home." So rather than be saddled with the burden of bitterness, they sang.
Right.
And the music is the release. So you don't have to go around and pop somebody upside the head or shoot them or anything. You can still love the people that have disenfranchised you and gone off on you in so many crazy ways. You can, because that's what the religious thing is supposed to be about. I don't know, but I don't know a lot, but I know that's supposed to be about that. So through song was the way we communicated, and then the ebulliency of gospel, which then begins, people, you're clapping your hands, you're shouting, you're stomping your feet. That's getting the energy out. Nothing happens until something moves, and that's also physically. The physiology of your body, moving it and singing in this way, it lifts you up. That's your own sort of a spark that you can plug into yourself, music. And that's why music is so important. And so that's why, especially my Black brothers and sisters, that's why I want them to play music. I want those horns in their hands. I want the vocal cords activated, because I want them to have instruments in their hands rather than a gun.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if we can get people in schools, all those kids, give them instruments, because they want to take away the instruments now.
Well, that's the first thing they cut, right? Is the arts programs.
Yeah. So they say, "Oh, we don't need all those drums." No, give them a horn and let them express themselves.
For years I taught on the high school level and at various schools, and the schools I taught where my students would come out of let's say, predominantly black school, so they came out of the black gospel church. And I would get pianists and, bass players and you name it. And I would tell them, I was like, man, I don't know if you realize what an incredible gift that is, because I grew up in church, but it wasn't that kind of church. But you see immediately, especially the ones who were really vested in that.
Yeah.
It's going to feel good. It's going to be soulful. They're learning music in the oral tradition by ear. Yeah. So, yes, it's important to read, but they're learning it this way, the most natural way.
You ain't never seen a gospel choir with music.
Exactly.
They have learned the whole concert with
You mean you can do music without having sheet music in front of you? Is that possible? There's some band directors that, who shock me with that. Like, are you kidding me? Yeah. So you have all that going on, and you have such a history with playing in big bands. Where did that start? Did you have a big band program in a high school, or where did you get your first exposure to that?
Well, first of all, we were always hearing big bands, and as I mentioned before, Dad was the Duke Ellington guy. He also loved Count Basie and all that stuff. The jazz thing was a big element of my dad's, and I got to give it to my mom too. She just loved music, but I think her biggest concern was making sure the three men she had in that house, me, my brother, and my father, were taken care of. But, and I talk a lot about my dad, and it makes me feel guilty because my mother, who died at 59 of breast cancer, I miss her every day, and I just always want to say her name, Murtis Stripling. It just feels good to come out of my lips because it's so much a part of my heart. Sorry.
No, I get it. Yeah.
So Dad took us to all these big band things. So getting involved in big band was a no-brainer for me. But I also was doing youth symphonies and lots of classical stuff. So you had to audition for those youth symphonies, and so I started getting first chair in those orchestras and things like that. And then I started playing classical solos with a piano accompaniment. And I wish I had known Jan Grimes back in those days, because she would have done a much better job than the people I had,
She's the ninja when it comes to that.
Exactly. And so I get involved with big bands through my this thing with jazz. And I go to Eastman School of Music, which is where I met Bill Grimes, and I made it in the top band my first as a freshman, playing fifth trumpet. But
still,
I'm like, whoa, this is cool, because I've listened to all this big band music, and now I'm playing in a big band, and then we end up going to Switzerland. That's one of my first trips. And then Clark Terry came to Eastman, and Ray Wright, our great director there, Rayburn Wright, he said, Byron, why don't you go across the street and pick up Clark whenever we have rehearsals and performances? I said, you got to be kidding me. And he goes, yeah, go pick up Clark. Go pick him up now. So I do. I ring some buzzer, and the lady called up, and she said, Mr. Terry says come up to his room. He's still getting dressed. I'd never met this man. Knock on the door. He, come on in. And he was late to rehearsal. He's just hanging, talking, and getting dressed, and we're having a good old time. That's my first association with greatness.
Right.
Because I'd been listening to those recordings, and now I'm sitting next to this
you're very
person.
familiar with who he is.
I know who I'm talking to, and I know who's in front of me, and I'm not scared, though, because it was like, this guy's my friend. He breaks that barrier. And so I play in the jazz band. I played lead on one tune, and Clark Terry said, hey, that sounded nice, man. And before I left, he says, I'm starting a band, and we're going to tour Europe. Would you like to join me on that tour? And I said, no, I've got to get my legs waxed, so I don't have time. No, I'm just kidding. No, so I said, of course, yes. So I took time off and went on this big European tour, and then after the European tour, we did like 3 weeks in the United States, and then that changed my life. I got to hear Clark Terry every night live and that kind of stuff. So now I go back to Eastman to try to finish my degree, because I left as a sophomore. So I go back, try to finish, almost supposed to graduate, and I call Clark, and I said, hey, Clark, I'm getting ready to graduate. I don't know what I'm going to do afterwards. And nobody at school has told me what I might think about doing except get another degree,
Right.
He said, somebody will be giving you a call. So I said, all right, So the next day, I was in the dorms, one phone on every floor, right? And so no cell phones. And so somebody knocks on my door and says, hey, somebody on the on the phone wants to talk to you. They say their name is Lionel Hampton. And I said, it's got to be a joke, but okay, I'll answer it. And it was Lionel Hampton, and he said, I want you to go on this European tour with me. You're interested? Clark Terry, here's the funny part. He says, Clark Terry told me that you could play higher than Cat Anderson. Now, Cat Anderson was just like you know, could play really high. And so I said, okay, I can do that. I was always told, always take the gig, you know.
Right.
So I called up Clark, thank you for the recommendation, but I have to say, you told him that I could play higher than Cat Anderson. I was like, you know I can't do that. He goes, yeah, but he loves high notes. So when you get your first solo, just play a lot of high notes. He'll love it, you know. So that's how I got in Clark Terry's band. Real quickly, then I'm in his band for about a year or more, and then I get a call from my friend John Fetchuk. He told him about me. He said, you want to play in Woody Herman's band? So I went right from there to Woody Herman's band. Amazing experience. Woody was great to me. Always featured me every night. Great thing. And then I get a call from the Count Basie band. And they said, hey, we'd love you to join us. Can you meet us here, there? I was like, yes, I'm there. And that's sort of my big band chronology. And then from there, I moved to after that, I moved to New York. Yeah.
Wow. Can you speak a little bit to, because, you know, I mean, there's all kinds of very talented people out there, but your career and your resume is just pretty astounding. And I kind of think I know the answer to this one, but you have a positivity, obviously an incredible work ethic that comes from your family. It just a thing that I'm assuming or attributing all of this success and this, you know, this freelance networking thing that has led you to so many opportunities. It's a result of just being that kind of person, right? Like, I guess what I'm asking is, if you were to give advice to someone, an up-and-coming musician who is trying to do this, wouldn't you say that's a huge part of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think our relationships with people, and not to get into racial things. I mean, people are intimidated by black men, honestly. They intimidate policemen even.
Right.
But, you know, you meet me, I'm not going to do anything to you. I can't fight you and I can't shoot you because I don't do the gun thing. So I just got to try to talk you into liking me. And hopefully you'll feel the authenticity of that.
Right.
The people that work the most are the people that are likable. We want to be around people.
Right.
I mean, as Bill Grimes has put this band together to play tonight, I like everybody in the band. I don't know everybody, but just a few minutes. Okay, yeah, this is one of my guys. Like, I feel comfortable with everybody.
Right.
You have to ask yourself when you're a musician, when I walk in the room, does it get a little bit brighter or does it get a little darker? Do the lights start to flicker and like, oh, here he is.
Right.
Am I a gossiper? Am I always whispering about, you know, so and so and so and so and so and so? So, I mean, the quick answer is, you know, I've always had this policy of be nice to people, but it's not hard for me. It's not something that I'm doing because I'm supposed to do it.
You're just
it's
being
who
you.
I am.
Right.
I love people. I love interacting with them. I love laughing. And so there's got to be laughter wherever I am because things are too crazy not to have that. So when you establish good personal relationships with people right from the very beginning, and that begins in talking and learning about others too, because that's where you grow and you find out their background. Hopefully, after this podcast is over, I will have almost nothing to say because I'm talking too much now. So it's those relationships that are important, and to develop those and to have that likability factor.
I totally get it. Well, you know, for our listeners, I mean, our listeners, or, you know, anyone out there can Google Byron Stripling and, you know, the resume comes up. But, I mean, just a couple of high points I want to mention. And so you already mentioned Lionel Hampton, but, I mean, okay, so I have a list here of just orchestras that you've worked with. And that's kind of a full circle thing, right? Because you said, you know, that came from your family, playing with orchestras, singing with orchestras.
Right.
So talk to me about what that looks like. So you're a featured artist many times in this situation, or more recently, you're the principal pops conductor for the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra.
Right.
So you're conducting.
Right. So I conduct most of my shows now.
Okay.
And I create them so I can kind of host it and then also, you know, work with the orchestra, and then I do my thing, and again, also on that kind of thing, it's creating shows from the ground up, and Bill Grimes has been, instrumental in that, if you will.
Because he does most of your
He
arrangements.
does a
many
ton of
your
my
arrangements,
arrangements, and he's like the best. And whenever I do, the musician's like, "Well, I like that chart. Didn't like that other one, but I like that Grimes chart." You know. And so I get, you get feedback from that, and you say, "Yeah, I'm doing the right thing there." And so I'm appreciative to Bill for that, and that's really helped me move forward in that career. The reason I got into conducting was I didn't want to be one of those people who's like, "Oh man, that tempo's too slow. He should be doing that. He should give us more of an upbeat. He should do the. He should," and you just kind of should all over yourself, with that. It's like, no. My friends told me, you actually kind of talk a lot about this guy should do this. Why don't you do it? Now they weren't saying that because they thought I could do it. They were just tired of hearing me talk about it. I want to be clear. Nobody encouraged me to start conducting. They were like, "Yeah, if you think you got the right tempo, well, then you need to start trying to conduct something rather than complain about it." And I'm always mindful of complainers, and because I work with them all the time, and many times I can be one of them, so I try to temper that. So the conducting thing was to do that, but also improve my musicianship, and maybe there's something in the way that I rehearse or I conduct an orchestra that can bring out something. Especially, I just do pops, although I'm doing Rhapsody in Blue in a couple weeks, and there's other ones, and I will do. In fact, I got to ask Bill Grimes about a piece that. Anyway, that's off topic. Maybe there's something I can bring out with my pop and jazz experience that will get the orchestra to play with more feeling of what that should be sounding like.
Right.
So that's why I started doing that.
Well, I'm curious to get into the weeds a little bit with conducting. Like, is that something you studied at Eastman, or did you just kind of do it?
Well, I've conducted a jazz band for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And before that, when I used to do a lot of things with universities and high schools, I would always conduct my own music on that I brought. And so it's just like moving to another level. I started, I think the first I might have conducted, but it doesn't matter. Just the thought is like I just gradually been getting into it and then diving deeper. And then my whole thing is, just to cut to the chase, is coaching. And Bill has been a great coach for me. So in all aspects, but especially in conducting. My mentor, Jeff Tyzik, has been, he told me to do this. He said, "Yeah, you need to add conducting to that. I've seen you do things. You got it, do that." But I coach with him too. So if I do one of his shows or whatever I need, I say, how would you articulate this to the orchestra? What helps get to the next level? That kind of stuff. So
right. I mean, in many cases, these are some of the best orchestras on the planet.
Yeah. I mean, I got lucky with the one of my first gigs was conducting the Boston Symphony in Tanglewood.
Wow.
I mean,
yeah.
But I had my good friend Bobby Floyd on piano, so I was safe there. He could save anything.
Talk about a monster pianist. Wow. Well, so what's coming up next?
Well, let me see. See, I'm always in the gig I'm in until it's over, and then I start thinking about the next. I'm going to Evansville, Illinois. I just came from West Virginia. Then I came here to do things with you and Bill, and then I think I have a few days off, and then I go to Edwardsville, Illinois. Then I do somebody else, the Columbus Jazz Orchestra for a week, and then I do the Pittsburgh Symphony, second or third week of April, whatever it is.
Okay.
So that's what's coming up.
And we haven't really talked too much about like your recordings, and I know you've recorded really with one of my favorite pianists, Bill Charlap, Peter Washington. Like, so how many recordings do you have out there that are under your own name?
Under my own name, really it's about 4. Most of them you can't find. There's 2 of them you can probably find. But my first ones I was happy to get Bill Charlap, who I'd become friendly with just working around New York. And he had hired me to do a couple things at the 92nd Street Y, which he used to program. And then Dennis McCrell I had on drums, Count Basie's last drummer. And he was on my first album, as well as Peter Washington was on bass on that one. And I had my friend Dave Glasser on the first one. Then the second record, I had that same rhythm section. But then I had this great tenor player named Frank West, who was with the Count Basie band, and he was like a dear friend. He was like almost 80 at the time, and still just tearing it up. You know.
Yeah.
So that's my personal recording career. And then I self-produced a couple things, but they go out and then they come back in. You know. So,
I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, man, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to the concert tonight. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
I'm nervous, and I bit off most of my fingers now. You know. I have little nubs here.
I just don't understand. I'm looking at this resume, how you can be nervous about anything.
You know,
musically.
you're always nervous if you care, I think.
Well, I understand
and then you have
that.
to make the distinction between am I nervous or am I excited or am I both?
And nervousness is energy that can be used.
It's energy.
Yeah.
Yes, certainly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's why I look at it. So I am always a bit nervous, but the stage is medicine for me. Because I have low self-esteem, so it helps my self-esteem. So that's the moral of this whole podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to improve your self-esteem, go on stage and play the trumpet.
There you go. There's no hiding behind that instrument.
That's true. Yes, yes.
Well, so for listeners and viewers, where can they find you? Like online, social media?
Go to byronstripling.com, I think it is. And that's where you can say hi and stuff. And then I'm on, Facebook and Twitter, but I need to hire somebody to get me on the other stuff because I'm too busy practicing to be.
Hey, amen to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get my C-sharp scale together.
The Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge would like to acknowledge our generous sponsors, the Shell Corporation, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Louisiana Office of Cultural Development, and the City of Baton Rouge.